I'm E.R. Bills. We're the editors of Roadkill, Texas Horror by Texas Writers, and kind of been a long road, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Except we only started
pretty quick.
Yeah, we only started like 6 months ago. So, the idea for Roadkill actually came up when we were at the North Texas Book Festival in April, and we were just hanging out between signings or discussions, and I don't know, about history, books, film, just crazy ideas in general. And one of us, I can't remember now, but the idea popped in our head about a horror anthology of Texas horror, because at least to my recollection, we couldn't think of any. And in fact, there aren't even a lot of big names in Texas horror, so it was sort of like a question that was asked, and we just kind of toyed with the idea and tossed it around, and then we said, well, maybe we ought to try to do this. And what was that, mid-April?
I think it was farther along than that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, well, if we're going to do it, we ought to try to have it out by Halloween. So then we started reaching out in every direction. You know, I guess 30 years ago it would have taken us 2 years to do this, but with the internet and everything, we were able to reach some writers, and we were able to put the thing together. I'm very proud of this publication. With the Eakin Press, I kind of sprung it on my publisher, Billy Eakin. He just walked up. Thanks, Billy. Really cold turkey. It's not what the Eakin Press necessarily does most of the time, but I pitched it to him out of thin air, and he said, "Sure, you know, I think that would work." And so you don't get that from a publisher usually. You know, it's usually a real big headache and a long process. But with Billy, you know, it sounds like a good idea. We could do that. We could try that. And I think we probably put it together faster than we thought he would. Or sorry, we probably put it together faster than he thought we would. But I just want to say thanks. Thanks for sort of taking a shot.
Let's give Billy a round of applause. Thanks, Billy.
Now, also, I want to thank, I've got a little piece of paper here because I'm not real good at talking to crowds, but I also want to thank The Last Word, okay? And Paul Combs. Paul, howdy, Paul, in the back. For holding this event, and buy some books. Buy some books, and not just
They're
ours.
almost gone, man.
Yeah, not just ours. Billy, they're almost gone. No, we have some more. Yeah, we have more, so we have 20.
I have more out in my car too.
Yeah, we have a bunch. But the point is, buy some books, and not just ours. You know, hit these shelves. When I grew up in this area, around the same time Paul did, actually, he was at Nolan, and I was at Aledo, private school boy. No.
We made up for it by losing the football.
No. Anyway, we were in the town growing up around the same time, and that wasn't not long after Mr. McCormick here did, and there were several independent bookstores in Fort Worth. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember, Mike. There were just tons, even for half price, like the Book Swap we were talking about, and the Barber. Was it Barber?
Barbers,
Oh, there's
yeah.
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
It was amazing, and it was really cool. And so now there's mostly just chain bookstores and The Last Word. I've heard we're in election season, and I'm not going to get political, but I don't know if either of the candidates blow my hair back or any of y'all's, but reading does. Reading gets my vote every day, every week, every month. Okay, reading gets my vote. And you know what? There are lots of candidates on these shelves, and I'd like you guys all to vote tonight, and I'd like you to vote pretty regular. You know what's the old saying? Vote
Early and often.
Early and often. This place has been open since May. I think it's an indispensable resource, and I think we need to support it. So, like I said, do some voting, and not just for our book.
I think you're hiring.
Amen.
And finally, I'd like to thank my fellow editor, Mr. McCormick. Bret was the steady hand, and I was the restless, cruel taskmaster. His knowledge of horror is almost encyclopedic, and his passion for writing is inspiring. He's an artist I admire, and I highly recommend his books, Headhunters from Outer Space, which takes place in Alvarado, big fan, and Hellfire, which I haven't got to yet, but I will. And then he's got a new book out for the kiddos. It's called, and I'm a huge fan of it for my nephews because they're little monsters, but it's called A to Z of the Unexplained, a primer for young readers interested in strange phenomena. And it's really cool. And so I recommend those, and man, it's been a joy.
Yeah, thanks, ER.
And now Bret's going to talk to you all about sort of the scene.
ER asked me to speak for about 5 minutes, and I agreed to. I was going to talk a little bit about the history of horror writers in Texas. And of course, we have Robert E. Howard, but we don't have much else that any of us really know about, other than this group in the room. So I got my mind thinking about Texas horror and how that could be different from any other form of horror that you might find anywhere else in the United States. We all know Texas is different. We have a very specific identity in the U.S. And how many of us here are Texans? Okay, so I don't have to explain too much about that, okay? I thought what I would do is share a true story, a slightly embarrassing true story that happened when I was a kid that kind of gives you an idea of how being a Texan can shape horror and maybe make it come out a little bit different than it would anywhere else in the country. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, my great aunt, Margaret Ann, was over visiting. And she and my mom read a lot, and they were sitting at the dining room table talking about famous writers. And the conversation went to how much money they made and all that sort of stuff. And I think Hemingway and Steinbeck were mentioned, and I was always the kid that was interested in scary stuff. I like scary movies, I like scary comic books, I like scary stories. So I kind of asserted myself into the conversation. I said, are there any famous writers who just write scary stuff? And they thought about it for a second, and Margaret Ann goes, yeah, I'd say probably Edgar Allan Poe. And I'm like, Edgar Allan Poe, is that somebody I can read, Mom? And she's like, yeah, sure, they probably have it at the library. So I went into my room and wrote down that name, intending to go to the library and find some of those stories that they said were pretty creepy and scary. So next time we go to the library, I think it was the downtown public library, might have been the East Side Library, I don't remember which. I was 10 years old, like I said. Everyone told me I was a smart kid. I considered myself precocious. Everybody else did. I knew how to use the card catalog, and I was looking and looking. And I kept looking at the name on the slip of paper I'd written, and I couldn't find anything. So I went up to a librarian. I had to wait a long time to get her attention. I said, do you have any stories by Edgar Allan Poe? And she said, of course we do, young man. I said, well, I've been looking at the card catalog. I can't find any. She's like, how can that be? And she walked over with me, and she opened it up. And she said, there, we have all of this. And I looked, and I went, she's like, you probably misspelled his name. People get the Allen part wrong often. She said, let me see what you wrote. And very embarrassed, I handed her the slip of paper I had. What they had said was Edgar Allan Poe. What I had heard with my little 10-year-old Texan ears was first name Ed, last name Poe, in the middle a sort of nickname, Growlin'. And I had imagined this big beefy guy, kind of like a DJ with a crew cut maybe and horn-rimmed glasses, who went around and liked scaring people. And probably the reason I thought that is I'd heard of Screamin' Jay Hawkins, and I'd heard of Howlin' Wolf, and I'd heard of Wolfman Jack, and I knew that adults sometimes gave themselves these whimsical nicknames. I didn't really understand why. So when I handed her that, she went, oh, this is rich. May I keep this? And she opened it up and walked away with it, before I could say no, And I imagined at that moment she was going to put it on a bulletin board as an example of really stupid things people who came into the library did. But I realized looking back on it today that was like a banner moment in my life. I discovered Edgar Allan Poe. Without realizing it, I wrote my first humorous horror fiction composed of 3 words, and I had an adoring fan, like right off the bat. So I'm hoping that every one of you writers who have stories in this book generate fans that are as impressed with your work as that librarian was with what I dreamed up that day. Anyway, thanks for contributing, guys.